Spirit animals, I'm spooky.
The narcissistic
I just saw the red cardinal.
Very upset.
See if it comes over.
Hey, I'm doing what I have to do to fit into this
was over
place
there,
in
but it takes
society.
me for. Oh, there he is.
You have to too. It's very intimidating when they come across a person that says, "No, I'm not trying to
There
fit
he is.
into your hierarchy. Right? I'm going to survive, and I'm going to do what's best mentally, emotionally, and physically for me and for my
There's the
family."
red cardinal.
Does this make sense?
Last time it flew right over to
Narcissistic
me.
People do not like that. You're going to find that most narcissistic
Look how
people are
bright
very
he
rigid.
is.
They have to have a certain structure because that's the only way they can feel they have a place
Flew
somewhere.
away.
Is
He
through
comes here all the
rigidity
time.
that they hope everybody follows. The rigidity of a structure they hope everybody adheres to. You being an empath and self-aware at that means you oftentimes don't fall into that rigidity. In fact, you want to bring forth new ideas,
flying
new
across the
concepts.
street,
How about we try this?
across the
How about we
road.
try that?
This is a road.
That drives them nuts. They're intimidated by that. Suddenly, their rigid
There's some
structure
doves.
and their power is gone.
I see doves.
Let's move on. I could go on and on about that one, but there's more to talk about, more exciting things here. Number 3, they respond negatively to uncomfortable questions. Yes, this is absolutely another way you know that you are intimidating to them, is how they respond negatively to uncomfortable questions. And when we talk about uncomfortable questions, we're not talking about rude, nasty questions. It could be as simple as, how are you doing? Like, how are you really doing?
It was so windy.
Are you okay?
My Halloween decorations
This
blew
is
away.
something
Just
I
got the
discovered
ghost, but
when
the
I was dealing
witch.
with the narcissistic
I don't know what happened to her.
I would
She's
genuinely
gone.
come to them when one of them looked down.
I gotta get
Because
another
again,
one.
A narcissistic person is hoping that they fool everybody.
It's gonna happen again. We're gonna have windy
That's why
weather
they're
again.
going to act and make weird jokes.
Where's
and
that
gestures.
cardinal?
But I
He's
was
in
the
that
one person
tree over
in
there.
that toxic family dynamic that would
Last
sit down
time
one of them and
when
say,
I just
"How are
opened
you
the door.
doing? Is everything okay?"
I got to open the door with the camera in my hand now.
I didn't realize it, but I
And
was
he came from
intimidating
that
them
that
when I was doing
tree
it.
right there, flying
I
across
was
over
seeing
here, and he
past the
perched
facade.
himself right
I was
there.
seeing past the hurt. And so to them, they would
I
respond
only see one, but I see a lot of
negatively to
blue
that.
jays, and I see a
They
lot
would
of other.
respond negatively
What is that?
by either, whatever, they would make some weird comments, or they'd get up, or they'd walk away. They would show their discomfort. They were uncomfortable with what they perceived to be a question that, I don't know, it was intimidating to them. Does this make sense?
I
So
like
they
this
respond
bird feed because it has
negatively
nuts in it, walnuts,
to uncomfortable
peanuts. It got
questions.
fruits in
Absolutely.
there, dried fruit.
Move on to number 4. They seem hesitant around you. Yes, this is definitely something that you're going to notice with narcissistic
He's talking
people.
about
They seem
empaths that
hesitant
have
around you.
psychic
Oftentimes
abilities,
people
and
want
why
to hide from you.
narcissists don't like you
It's
right
not
away because
common
they know.
when you're
They
dealing
know.
with a narcissistic person, they will come up and say something shallow, enter into a shallow
say
dialogue, and then they disappear.
Nasty things. Then they say,
Right? They're
"I'm just
hesitant to stay
kidding." You
around
know, that's their
They're
playlist.
hesitant to approach you.
You're so
They're hesitant
sensitive.
to stand in your presence.
See how
for
sensitive
any
you are
significant
when I
length
put
of
my
time.
hands on you.
Why? Because they're intimidated. You intimidate them just by
Why?
your presence.
Because you can see what they're doing.
They know
but other people don't.
being around you, it's going to be some deep conversation. Not that you're trying
And they get on
to
that
be there,
fierce,
but because that's who you are.
hamster
Because
wheel,
your empathy and your
going nowhere with them,
self-awareness
constantly
see
fawning
to deeper
them, feeling
levels
sorry for
automatically.
them.
They're going to be hesitant to even want to be
What's that over
around you
there?
unless they know they can come skipping by you and either say something love bombing, say something whatever, and then skip away. There was one of the narcissistic in-laws, the brother, he could hardly even be around me, to be honest with you.
And the thing is,
And again, it wasn't
they
because I was mean to
are
him. But
very
he would
slow
walk every now and then saying, "How's it going?" And then
brainwashing
he
you.
couldn't
It's
get- he couldn't
little by
wait
little, little by little,
He was
so you don't
hesitant
notice.
to be around me. It's as if my energy alone was
But even
like
he said it.
kryptonite
I'm
to
just
him.
kidding. Is their
It didn't
playlist?
matter how nice I was. As a matter
Just
of fact,
testing to see if
the
they can get away
nicer
with it.
I was,
And they throw that
the
at
more
you.
he stayed away. Again, they're hesitant to be around this because of the fact that your empathy and your self-awareness, again, it doesn't allow them to fool you. That defensive around others are usually compensating for their own internal struggles and insecurities. Well, this is exactly what narcissistic people do. right? They are innately competitive and defensive around others, which means they're compensating for their own internal struggles and insecurities. So they feel drawn to prove themselves and reassert a misguided sense of control or power over social situations or over a conversation, that they don't mind using tactics like blame shifting or condescension to do it at the expense of those around them.
No
If you
accountability.
notice these tendencies or behaviors in someone you're around, especially if they're directed towards you, it could be a ways to detect that you are intimidating them. They're intimidated by you.
Yeah.
The more you're dealing with family members or whomever, and they're acting like you're attacking them when really you're just being present with them. And maybe you're asking them questions. Or maybe you're trying to share some joy. But what's taking place is they're becoming defensive out of nowhere. And you're like, why? Well, this is why. It's you intimidate them. You're intimidating them because of your awareness, because you see through them. You're intimidating them. All right? This is super important to understand. Moving on, number 6. They have disengaged body language. Yes. A narcissistic person, oftentimes, who will be in your presence. You can download the Rowie membership app down below in the description box. Also, just added to the Rowie channel is t-shirts and hats and hoodies and mugs. You can show,
No, don't need none of that stuff.
talk and get to know each other. Either way, I want to thank you for your support.
No.
Well, because there's some good things in here for you. This is 11 ways to detect if you're intimidating someone by being too self-aware. This is something we typically don't talk about, is how you intimidate narcissistic people without even trying. And once we get through this article, you're going to understand why a lot of their rage and their nastiness
I'm aware of it.
comes from hating you. Yeah, of course it's because they hate you, but why? Well, because you
But you can
intimidate
see
them.
through them.
You intimidate them to no end. Well, let's move on to number 1, beginning with you notice their patterns. Now, number 1 is going to set the stage for the rest of this article. This speaks to the heart of a true empath. Now, I'm not talking about an empath out there who is a college-educated empath, meaning somebody who just went to college to learn psychology, to become a psychologist, to prescribe drugs to people. That's a learned form of empathy. I'm talking about you empaths who have this natural ability, this God-given gift, to not only be self-aware, aware of yourself and your emotions and how you are making other people feel around you, but the same awareness, the same self-awareness that you have, guess what it means? It means that you also are aware of the emotions of others. Why is this so intimidating to narcissistic people, you might be asking? Well, the answer is somewhat obvious if you think about it. Narcissists thrive in this world off of lying. They thrive off of nobody really knowing what's going on inside of them. Their livelihood depends on nobody truly seeing them. No matter what they say, no matter what they do, they're trying to keep people off balance. This is why when you get to know a narcissistic person in the beginning, they're going to demean you, devalue you, say inappropriate things, and then what are they going to say? I'm just kidding. This is just how I joke around. But what happens when you, as an empath, somebody who has a heightened sense of awareness, when you're around that, even without saying anything, your body language is going to say, whoa, there's something weird going on there. Are you not? Because you see through it. You don't buy for a minute that they're just joking. In fact, you know they're not. And this is the problem. Your heightened sense of awareness now sees through their nonsense, sees through their bullshit, sees through them saying that they're joking, and you see right into the heart of that person. The one thing that narcissists are trying to protect. You see, it's some form in the narcissist's life, they bought into this idea that they can fool everybody. They really truly believe that they can demean and devalue and act cruel and this and that and then pass it off as just kidding or pass it off as, okay, I didn't mean it. But when they come across a true empath, suddenly they're face to face with somebody who they can see, isn't buying it. This is one of the most difficult things for true empaths to understand. It was difficult for me to accept. When I was dealing with the narcissistic in-laws, for example, I never understood why they were growing in anger and animosity towards me, yet I wasn't saying anything. I wasn't attacking them. I wasn't calling them names like they were calling me names. It took the mother of my kids back then to say, Kevin, you don't understand how your presence is coming off to them. I'm like, I'm not doing anything. I'm not trying to hurt them. No, you don't have to. What she was trying to tell me back then that I didn't realize is that my presence was seeing through the heart of what they called jokes and this and that. And I was seeing this brokenness and this deep-rooted hatred, this deep-rooted anger within these narcissistic people. And I didn't have to say a word. My presence alone and the way I engaged with them told them, I see you. The one thing narcissists don't want. This is now where we're going to continue on. And now that you're aware of this, you're aware now that narcissistic people are intimidated by your awareness. Now we're going to see the ways in which you can tell a narcissistic person is intimidated by your awareness and by your empathy, right? Number 2, it says this. They avoid your challenges of the status quo. They avoid your challenges of the status quo. What does this mean exactly? It says this. People who thrive within the rigidity of the status quo or find stagnant comfort in confining societal expectations or family expectations may push back against a self-aware person's questioning mentality. Your questioning mentality. One of the things that you may not realize about a self-aware empath is that you do struggle to go along with status quo, especially if it's unfair, if it seems imbalanced. This is me as well. I'm not really big on status quo. What you're going to find in most narcissistic family dynamics, they operate like a gang. They have a hierarchy, for example. The king and the queen of the family. And then they got the pawns, and then they got the jokers and the jesters. Whatever they want to decide to position things. Well, as a highly self-aware, empathic person, you're likely to walk in and look around and say, well, this isn't right. This person gets special treatment and that person gets, but no, I don't like this. How about we all treat each other as equal? How about we all act kind to each other? Right? This goes against, whether you like it or not, it goes against status quo. You see, narcissistic people depend on rigidity of status quo. They depend on a hierarchy in some way, shape, or form. In fact, they're fighting, and their maliciousness is fighting for a certain position in the family, and they believe they've earned it because they've fought their way there. Now, in comes somebody who's empathic and who's self-aware and who's aware of the emotions of others, comes in and says, yeah, no. I'm not interested in your position. I'm interested in how you treat people. This is a threat to them. A narcissistic person is going to say, how dare you? This is how it is. And I've worked hard, and I've taken my beat downs, and now I'm able to beat people down because this is the way. No. How about we treat each other just good and fair? They don't like that at all. So they're going to challenge. They're going to push back against that. But it gets deeper than that. Again, this rigidity that narcissistic people fall into, you'll even see it in the workplace. You'll even see it in society. A lot of narcissistic people, for example, would have been really strong backers of the vaccine, for example, around the time of COVID. Why? Because they're fighting for their position within society. It makes them feel good. I'm a part of this society. I'm a part of this hierarchy. This is how we're going to do it. And then you have other people who are probably more empathic, more self-aware, more aware of their own body, more aware of their own feelings, saying, no, we don't have to do that. Well, the narcissistic types of personalities are going to get very upset. Hey, I'm doing what I have to do to fit into this place in society, so you should have to too. It's very intimidating when they come across a person that says, no, I'm not trying to fit into your hierarchy. Right? I'm going to survive, and I'm going to do what's best mentally, emotionally, and physically for me and for my family. Does this make sense? Narcissistic people do not like that. You're going to find that most narcissistic people are very rigid. They have to have a certain structure because that's the only way they can feel they have a place in life, is through the rigidity that they hope everybody follows. the rigidity of a structure they hope everybody adheres to. You being an empath and self-aware at that means you oftentimes don't fall into that rigidity. In fact, you want to bring forth new ideas, new concepts. How about we try this? How about we try that? That drives them nuts. They're intimidated by that. Suddenly, their rigid structure and their power is gone. Let's move on. I could go on and on about that one, but there's more to talk about, more exciting things here. Number 3, they respond negatively to uncomfortable questions. Yes, this is absolutely another way you know that you are intimidating to them, is how they respond negatively to uncomfortable questions. And when we talk about uncomfortable questions, we're not talking about rude, nasty questions. It could be as simple as, how are you doing? Like, how are you really doing? Are you okay? This is something I discovered when I was dealing with the narcissistic in-laws. I would genuinely come to them when one of them looked down, which again, a narcissistic person is hoping that they fool everybody. That's why they're going to act and make weird jokes and gestures. But I was the one person in that toxic family dynamic that would sit down one of them and say, how are you doing? Is everything okay? And I didn't realize it, but I was intimidating them when I was doing that. I was seeing past the facade. I was seeing past the hurt. And so to them, they would respond negatively to that. They would respond negatively by either, yeah, whatever, they would make some weird comments, or they'd get up, or they'd walk away. They would show their discomfort. They were uncomfortable with what they perceived to be a question that, I don't know, it was intimidating to them. Does this make sense? So they respond negatively to uncomfortable questions. Absolutely.
That's why nobody likes you already.
Move on to number 4.
You can see through them.
They seem hesitant around you. Yes, this is definitely something that you're going to notice with narcissistic people. They seem hesitant around you, oftentimes even wanting to hide from you. It's not uncommon when you're dealing with a narcissistic person. They will come up and say something shallow, enter into a shallow dialogue, and then they disappear. Right? They're hesitant to stay around you. They're hesitant to approach you. They're hesitant to stand in your presence for any significant length of time. Why? Because they're intimidated. You intimidate them just by your presence, because they know that being around you, it's going to be some deep conversation. Not that you're trying to be there, but because that's who you are. Because your empathy and your self-awareness sees to deeper levels automatically, they're going to be hesitant to even want to be around you unless they know they can come skipping by you and either say something love bombing, say something whatever, and then skip away. There was one of the narcissistic in-laws, the brother, he could hardly even be around me, to be honest with you. And again, it wasn't because I was mean to him, but he would walk up every now and then and say, hey, how's it going? And then he just couldn't wait to disappear. He was hesitant to be around me. It's as if my energy alone was like kryptonite to him. And it didn't matter how nice I was. As a matter of fact, the nicer I was, the more he stayed away. Again, they're hesitant to be around this because of the fact that your empathy and your self-awareness, again, it doesn't allow them to fool you. That is, by and large, why they are so hesitant to be around you. Number 5, they act defensive around you. Absolutely. It says this: many individuals who are more innately competitive and defensive around others are usually compensating for their own internal struggles and insecurities. Well, this is exactly what narcissistic people do, right? They are innately competitive and defensive around others, which means they're compensating for their own internal struggles and insecurities. So they feel drawn to prove themselves and reassert a misguided sense of control or power over social situations or over a conversation, that they don't mind using tactics like blame shifting or condescension to do it at the expense of those around them. If you notice these tendencies or behaviors in someone you're around, especially if they're directed towards you, it could be a ways to detect that you are intimidating them. They're intimidated by you. The more defensive a person is around you, acting like you're attacking them, even though you're not. And this is what narcissistic personalities do. They act like you're attacking them. How many of you wondered that? You're dealing with family members or whomever, and they're acting like you're attacking them when really you're just being present with them. And maybe you're asking them questions. Or maybe you're trying to share some joy. But what's taking place is they're becoming defensive out of nowhere. And you're like, why? Well, this is why. It's you intimidate them. You're intimidating them because of your awareness, because you see through them. You're intimidating them. All right? This is super important to understand. Moving on, number 6. They have disengaged body language. Yes. A narcissistic person, oftentimes, who will be in your presence and you're trying to talk to them, you'll see the signs of their body squirm, like they don't want to really engage with you. Now, if you're not careful, this can cause you to say, is there something wrong with me? Like, does my breath smell? Or am I ugly? Or what's going on? And I oftentimes used to wonder this myself when I was dealing with the narcissistic in-laws. What's going on? I'm just trying to come up and have a healthy conversation and see how you're doing. And I'm watching this person squirm and not look me in the eyes and look away and not want to engage with me, right? They're very disengaged in conversation with me. I would even remember sitting down on a couch and they were sitting across from me. There's 2 of the sister-in-laws and they couldn't even look at me. Right? And by the way, a lot of people say, Kevin, a whole family of people? Yeah, no, this whole family was a structured, rigid, very rigid, what I call now collective narcissism. Again, they operate in this hierarchy, which most narcissists do, fighting each other for position and status. And I was the one guy walking into that family saying, hey, can we all get along? We're here to love all of you, right? Love you guys, let's hang out. Well, they had no place within their rigid hierarchy for any of that. So they were very uncomfortable. And one of them, they would sit across the couch from me. And I'm a very engaging person. I like to talk. But again, what I didn't realize is that through my communication, I was letting it be known that I'm a highly self-aware person. I'm aware of what comes out of my mouth. I'm aware of my energy. But I was aware of theirs as well. And nobody explained this to me, and nobody probably explained that to them. Nobody explained it to the mother of my kids. But it was very intimidating for those poor narcissistic people to be sitting across from somebody who they couldn't even really look at. And I would just be asking them about their day. Tell me about what's going on. How's life? How's your work? How's this? How's that? And they're sitting there on the couch, looking down. And then they'd look at each other. They'd have a little conversation with each other, pretending they couldn't even hear me. All out of their intimidation. No idea that I had such an intimidating presence simply because I was an empath who was self-aware and aware of their emotions. So this is something that we have to understand.
Hello? Can anyone hear me? Wolfman is an iconic monster.
There's a lot of lore in Wolfman having a monster. Number 7. They apologize often around you. Now, I know, so this is going to throw a lot of you off because you're going to say, the narcissist never apologized to me. And listen, I would say the same. I never got an apology from the narcissistic in-laws or people who were nasty and mean towards me, even if they were intimidated by me. Okay? But then as I think about it, as I look back, in their own way, they were apologizing. Not apologizing, it was more walking on eggshells, but I didn't even pick up on it. As I look back now, the narcissists were walking on eggshells around me. So what did this look like? It wasn't exactly an apology, but there were times when one of them would run their mouth, for example, at me, calling me names and trying to laugh it off in their shallow way because this is what they do. Again, they believe they have the world full. So long as they can put other people down, no one's paying attention to what's going on inside of them. Except for me, unfortunately, being the highly self-aware, empathic person there, I saw exactly what was going on inside of them. But what they would do is one of them would come up and say, they're just kidding. They're just kidding. Kevin, it's just a joke. That's just how they talk. And then that person would scurry along. In a way, it's an apology. In a way, it's them saying, we don't want him to think that there's something wrong. Which, by the way, was a lie. And that's what they're, in a way, apologizing for. They realize they're hurting. They realize they're angry. They realize they're covering it up. Of course they know it, but they don't expect people around them to know it. And so they feel around you like they have to walk on eggshells. So while they might not be apologizing for their outbursts and their rage and their negativity, they're not going to apologize for that. But they will have moments of walking on eggshells around you, saying, "No, it was just a joke. I didn't mean anything," which is a way of them apologizing around you all the time. Again, they're doing this because you're intimidating them. Your presence is intimidating them as you see through their facade of acting like everything's a joke, and you see through the hearts of their issues. Fascinating, right? Number 8. They seem to brag more about themselves when you're around. Yes. Oh my goodness. How many of you have had narcissistic family members or people at work who come around you and it's always like they're bragging? Constantly. What is up with that? It says this: to overcompensate for their insecurity and to seek praise from someone they view as innately superior to them. Listen, how many of you are aware of this? There's a possibility that the narcissistic people in your life who are constantly bragging to you are actually doing it because they view you as innately superior. Because of your empathy, because you're self-aware, they can't help but see you as a superior person. And you wouldn't know it because they're always coming up to you, and the only way they can interact with you is to brag about themselves. And I'm reminded again of being around those in-laws because that's all they would do. One of the brothers, the only time he engaged with me was he'd come up and have his chest puffed out like this, walking up to me. And I used to think to myself all the time, why is he doing that? Why is he walking in front of me with his chest puffed out? Talking about his new business venture, this and that and blah, blah. And then he'd scurry along, not ever even able to have a genuine conversation with me, a deep conversation with me. He avoided that. He just come to talk about the money he was making with his chest puffed out. And I didn't realize it at the time. I was offended by all of this. I didn't understand it. But really, this makes sense. It's an overcompensation for their insecurity. All bragging is an overcompensation for their insecurity because they are in the presence of somebody innately superior. Wow. Mind blown. Take this away with you throughout this message. Oftentimes, as an empath, in fact, every time, as an empath who's highly self-aware, aware of your emotions, aware of theirs, you are innately superior to them. This is why they constantly brag. It's their only way to bring themselves back out of insecurity around you, to even be able to engage with you, is by bragging and boasting. Wow.
That makes sense.
Number 9,
That makes sense.
they don't ask you for help or advice. This one hits home for me. And the reason is because when I was dealing with those toxic narcissistic in-laws, I wanted so badly to be there for them. I wanted to say, hey, look, anything that you need to talk about, I want to be here. And they avoided me like the plague. How many of you have experienced that? Dealing with toxic narcissistic people, and you just want to put your hand on their shoulder and say, anything you need, I'm here for you. Genuinely, seriously. Anything you have to talk about, there's nothing that you could say that would shock me. I will talk any problem out with you. And what you're going to discover is this: they don't ask for help or advice on anything. They leave you alone. They leave you alone, right? It says this: people who are comfortable asking for help and advice from their peers are generally perceived as more competent, right?
Oh, shit.
But watch this, down at the bottom, especially if they're driven by approval of others or a misguided assumption that asking for help makes them seem weak, they may suffer in silence rather than ask somebody they're intimidated by for help. Again, there's that word intimidation. A narcissistic person who is intimidated by you and your self-awareness is going to refuse to ask for help because they're intimidated by you. It's not because you don't have help to give them. It's not because you don't have good advice for them. It's because they're too intimidated by you. Fascinating. Number 10. It says they only focus on superficial things in conversations with you. Yes. This is how you know you intimidate a person. And typically with narcissistic people, the only conversations you have are superficial at best. Right? We oftentimes talk within narcissistic abuse communities that you can't have conversations with narcissistic people unless it's very superficial. How's the weather? How's this, right? It's a form of gray rocking. To us, how many of you are aware of this? That in order to meet a narcissistic person on a level that doesn't intimidate them, we have to gray rock them. That's us, you as an empath, as a self-aware person, that's you acting, you're acting superficial. It's the only way that they might not be intimidated, but it's going to be a failure because even when you're acting, even when you are gray rocking, your presence alone is still, without you even realizing it, you're still emitting the reality that you're hyper aware of what's going on. You're aware of your emotions, you're aware of theirs. So even gray rocking them is going to fail because they still feel that you are seeing deep into their soul. Okay? So, but on their behalf, what they're going to make sure is that they want to keep conversations superficial with you. Nothing deep. They don't want you peering into them. They don't want you asking any difficult questions. They just want to talk about the weather, talk about this, talk about stuff that doesn't matter. How many of you have experienced that? You're like done with that. With these people, we talk about stuff that does not even matter. Who cares? It's all they can do because they're intimidated by you and they're intimidated to get into a conversation that can trigger their insecurities. Number 11. The final way you're going to know that you intimidate a narcissistic person is that you tend to lead conversations with them. You're leading the conversation. So if they're not walking by you to say something superficial, if you're ever to have any type of a formal conversation, it's going to be because you have to lead it. You're going to have to take the effort. You're going to have to make the effort to walk up to them, to sit down, and to really try to have conversation. It says this: when they're not talking about themselves or trying to uphold a perfectionist image to someone, which is what narcissists do, right? An intimidated person may rely on others to lead conversations. You're actually like a parent. You have to walk up to them and say, hey, would you like to sit down and talk? In order to ever have a healthy conversation with a narcissistic person, you would have to literally do that. You'd almost have to be like in a role of a mother or a father saying, hey, would you like to sit down and talk? And you'd have to lead every step of the way. This is how you know they're intimidated by you. Because they're not able to meet you there and engage with you there, you're going to have to literally lead them through what it's like to sit down and have a normal, healthy conversation. But, by the way, I don't encourage anybody doing that. That's not what this is saying. This isn't telling you to do that. It's not saying try to have healthy conversations with narcissistic people. You can't. For all of the reasons mentioned in this article, which comes down to this: you intimidate them. You intimidate them because of your empathy. You intimidate them because of your self-awareness and your awareness of them. It's absolutely intimidating. So you will never have a healthy discussion. Even if you are to sit down and lead them through a conversation, they will become defensive. They will start to brag. They will be demeaning and devaluing. They will do everything in their power to get out from under being intimidated in your presence. You see, this is why you can never have a good relationship with a narcissistic person, because they will never stop being intimidated by you. And it's not even because you are actively trying to intimidate them. It is simply because you are an empathic, self-aware person who is also aware of their emotions. This fact alone will intimidate them because they can never fool you. They will never be able to sucker you. You will always see through them. You will always see through their words, their jokes, the things that they're saying. You will always see through it. Even if you don't tell them you see through it, your body language will do it for you. Your presence does it for you. Your light is doing it for you. Your light is intimidating to narcissistic people. I hope that this message is inspiring to those of you right now who are curious and wondering why these narcissistic people are treating you the way that they are.